Hi class, Professor Alston here, and we're going to get into a lot of exciting things in this Business 120 class, which is Introduction to Business. I've been teaching business for about 30, 40 years now. I was 20 years in the United States Navy, and so I bring a wealth of knowledge. It's from the industry as well as from the world that will apply to this course. In this course, we're going to learn how to start a business, maybe stop a business, maybe improve our business. We'll talk about human resources. We'll get into ethical practices. We'll also talk about how the economy truly affects your business, and we'll get into some of that. And I think you have more of an eye-opening experience when you realize it's a lot involved in running a business. So with that said, let's get into, let's say, the academic mode. Let's get ready for a great journey into the introduction to business. First chapter talks about understanding economic systems and business. The economic system, which means which kind of systems we are actually utilizing in various markets or within various countries. Different ways of doing business. Learning outcomes that we will be exploring will basically talk about explaining basic concepts surrounding economics. We shall explain what capitalism is and how free markets actually work. We'll compare socialism and communism. And we'll see how sometimes when you don't have, let's say, an open market, your economy does not always thrive. And we'll get into that in terms of communism. We'll analyze the trends towards mixed economies. Also, we're going to describe the economic systems of the United States, which basically is our GDP. And we'll contrast fiscal policies and monetary policies and explain how each affects the economy. Mariana here, her mission is to transform the economic role of governments, which means look at how they're doing their day-to-day business and see if she could improve upon their own actual governmental policies. She also looks to help do regulators to do things better, and she's a fixer of market failures. She also is an innovator and drives basically the market growth. That's what her background is. She's an economist. She worked with the U.S. presidential candidates. She's also worked with British Parliament and the European Union. Ladies and gentlemen, she encourages combining the power of the private and public sectors. That's that mixed economy we actually highlighted earlier, just for a minute there. Some examples are Apollo Space Program and Apple. Ladies and gentlemen, Maria Mazzucata. Name this company. This is one of those moments where you think of how things affect the world. One particular business did something that they were just trying to fix something within their own company, and they changed some of the global economic outcomes. So, growth of US GDP can be highly influenced by productivity of the nation's workforce, which means folks that are actually doing day to day jobs contribute to our economy. It also can impact the economy through some companies' misfortunes. For example, there was a airline that was forced to stop production of its 737 MAX airline, which is a jumbo jet. So the company, as well as their suppliers and airlines that flew the 737, saw their growth severely impact. So that means something that company did affected a lot more people than just the internal workings of their company. Can you guess what company that is? A lot of airliners out there, a lot of people who actually produce airplanes. Okay, never mind. Okay, so the answer is Boeing. Boeing Airlines. So how economic conditions affect business. So economic effect. Business success in the United States is due partly to our free economic and social climate. And what does that mean? Free economic and social climate, which means we try to do business globally. We don't have a closed system. Years upon years ago, Cuba was closed for trading. We had a trading embargo. They were a very unique country, so to speak. Now we have open trade with them, and they are a thriving country. Changes in U.S. economic or political systems influence business success. Let's go back to that bullet. changes in U.S. economic or political systems. We have President Trump in office now. We have tariffs everywhere. Every country is being affected. Currently, he went ahead and put a 50%, wow, tariff on India because India is importing its oil from Russia. And currently, our political system, meaning Donald Trump, has an issue with Russia. That's exactly how our economic systems become affected. Something else, my son and I, for the first time, went to Comic Con. Comic Con is this amazing convention which highlights Marvel comics, DC comics, and so forth. I've never been. When I got there, it was so overwhelming. Everyone was in costume. All the vendors were there. Celebrities were there. Queen Latifah was there of all people. George Lucas, who actually created, Star Wars. Very exciting. But the drawback was a lot of international vendors weren't there because of the what? You said it, the tariffs. So that's how things are affected. I was very surprised because people who have been coming to Comic Con for years said, hey, you know what? This is normally bigger. There's a lot more vendors. We only have about 50% of the vendors that are normally here. I was like, well, wow. But that accounts for those tariffs. Global economics and global politics also influence businesses in the United States. Right there. That's carbon copy of what I just said. So we have to be careful as to how we allow, let's say, our political systems to affect our economy. That's the purpose of the House of Representatives. That's the purpose of Congress. That's the purpose of a lot of checks and balances we have in place. Right now, there's not a lot of checks and balances. This is a really great slide because it shows Vietnam. It shows, I'm sorry, not Vietnam, Korea. It shows South Korea and North Korea and the contrast, the difference, the economic contrast shown here is remarkable. Not in a good way, but in a bad way. Business is booming in Seoul, which is South Korea, but in North Korea, because it's a communistic country, it's not doing as well. So ponder that just for a minute. Why is South Korea doing phenomenally well, but North Korea is not? There's no international or global goods trading in and out of North Korea because they're communistic. They're a closed economic society. I visited South Korea in 1988 for the 1988 Olympics. It was just a phenomenal city, beautiful, thriving. It looked like I was walking through New York. That's how modernized South Korea is. North Korea, picture on the left, it still looks like that. So you have to realize why sometimes we enter into global trading. We want to see the rest of the country, not, I'm sorry, the rest of the world, hopefully be successful, or at least strive to be successful. In order to do that, we need global trading. How economic conditions affect businesses. These are the conditions. So what is economics, first of all? Economics, we know, is the study of how society chooses to employ resources to produce goods and services and distribute them for consumption amongst various competing groups and individuals. I like that one part of that definition is various competing groups. What does that mean to you? Competing groups means that there are other groups that would like some of our resources, and we actually want some of their resources. So if they're competing, then we're going to have some kind of bargaining chip and saying, look, we've got a lot of cotton in America, but we don't have a lot of factories that make clothing. Can we send you our cotton, our raw product, and you turn it into shirts, jerseys, pants? That's that competing group or individuals. That's the concept. Macroeconomics is the part of the economic study that look at the operations of a nation's economy as a whole. The bigger picture, macro, max. The way you can do mac and micro is mac is like maximum, huge. That's one way of hopefully understanding that definition. And then microeconomic, the part of economics, okay? The economic study that looks at the behavior of people and organizations in particular markets. So you got macro, looking at overall operations of a nation's economic or economy, and then you look at individual markets. You look at how behaviors, okay? We're talking about the stock market. We're talking about let's say startups, entrepreneurships. What's happening? So we're looking on an individual basis. Going back to how economics conditions affect businesses, again, we know what economics is so far. And I also know that people refer to economics as the study of wealth. How does a country become wealthy? Not wealthy rich, but wealth and let's say strong. Examples of ways to increase resources, meaning wealth, basically is new energy sources. We've got to look at new energy sources. We're doing that with windmill, which is wind energy. We're looking at solar, which is huge now. We're looking at so many other ways to raise crops, new ways of growing foods. We've got, I wish I would have put the clip in here, but China has created a way of creatively harvesting and, or I should say, raising pigs. They built a 22 building apartment building, is what I want to call it, and it's only housed by pigs. Google that. Google that and say pig farm in China inside of a building. It will blow you away. They have the minimum staff of people. It's all run through AI. It's all run through automation. That is a way that you will make money because in America we've got fields and fields and fields. We've got farms and farms and farms of pig farms, and people still are manually doing what they have to do to clean up, behind the pigs. China has identified a way where it's all automated. Wow. New ways of creating goods and services, which is nanotechnology, 3D printing, and 4D technology. And right now, if you're not on board with AI, then you're going to be left behind. AI is the wave of the future. Here's a good example of a new way of producing resources. New ways of producing goods and services add resources to the economy and create more employment. Fish farms, for instance, should say, create both food and jobs. This is a great idea here. So these are baby fish, and they grow into, of course, adult fish, and that produces a great deal more resources for this particular economy. Economic conditions affect businesses continued here. So the secret to creating a wealthy economy, okay, the dismal science. Thomas Malthus believed that if the rich had most of the wealth and the poor had most of the population, resources would run out. That was his philosophy. He's an economist. Latest world statistics do show population growing more slowly than expected. So hopefully this will be the opposite of his, let's say, hypothesis. World population could grow from boom to bust, which means booming is great. Bust means you have too many people. The global population will grow to nearly 10 billion people by 2050. This increase will have a major impact, of course, it's going to be a major impact on resources and could lead to significant lifestyle changes. You're going to do things a little differently. You're not going to go to the store every week. You're going to go maybe once a month. You're not going to take those excursions anymore because you can't afford it. Things are going to be overly crowded. Japan has experienced that. China has experienced that. Population should stabilize according to, let's say, the labor statistics as well as global statistics by 2100 due to declining birth rates. Now, that's a key factor. If people are not having babies, if they aren't producing, then we're not going to have population growth. Good example of this is Japan. Japan right now is, I would say, 75% to 80% elderly. There's no new growth. They actually are enticing people, mostly Americans, to move to Japan. They'll give them a house to live in and a job if they will help repopulate Japan. Unheard of. One of the most populated uh, nations on the planet is hoping people would move to their country and repopulate it. Wow. Older people will make up a large portion of the population for years. We see that, especially in Japan. This also could lead to future economic difficulties if there is a lack of young people in the workforce. Now, what does that mean to you? That means these are innovative, young, sharp, teenage to 20-year-old to 30-year-olds who have a great deal of imagination on how to regrow the economy. Doesn't happen if you have nothing but, let's say, our older or elderly people running the country. Something to think about. How economic conditions affect business. The secret to creating a wealthy economy continue. We're going to talk about contrast to math. There's some macro, which is the bigger. Max, remember, economists just to say, believe a larger population can be a resource, bigger workforce. An educated population is highly valuable. We know this. I talk to my students all the time. They said they're going to finish their associates and that's all they need to do. It's so much more you have to do. You have to go to your bachelor's, your master's. You got to get to the point where you could theorize, your future, how you can help the world. And this is what we're talking about. Educated people, they're highly valuable. Business owners provide jobs and economic growth for their employees and communities as well as for themselves. Business owners, which are the infrastructure of America, which is entrepreneurship, we're the ones that are doing what the government cannot do. My ex-wife and I own two international preschools, and we're doing what the government can't do. They can't provide preschool, childcare at a reasonable cost. The other part of this is if you don't, how do you say, como se dice en inglés? If you don't actually create something that the community wants and needs, then you're not actually contributing back to the community. Adam Smith, and the creator of wealth. Smith believed these three things. Freedom was vital to any economy's survival. Freedom to own land or property and the right to keep the profits of a business is essential. People will work hard if they believe they will be rewarded. Basic leadership and management. That ties into introduction to business. I was 20 years in the United States Navy, and I believe that when my sailors were rewarded, they worked harder for me and also led by example. I had a preschool here, comedy clubs here, a catering company here, and other businesses. And the most important thing I did was believe in my employees and reward them. So I guess I followed Adam Smith's theory without even knowing it. How the economic conditions affect business continue basically is an invisible hand. I love this one. The process that turns self-directed gain into social and economic benefits for all. That's the invisible hand. Someone behind the scenes doing something that is affecting the economy, but people don't know that they're doing it. The invisible hand. As people improve their own situation in life, they help the economy prosper through the production of goods, services, and ideas, and also charitable donations. My son works at Goodwill, and I think that is just the most um, solid nonprofit organization to work for because they give back to the special needs community. My son's autistic, and for him to be embraced and helped to get employment and tutored and or mentored through that journey is just phenomenal. This goes back to the invisible hand. Adam's theory again. According to Adam's theory, business owners are motivated to work hard because they know they will earn and keep the rewards of their labor. That is very true. When I had Kale's Comedy Hour, which is my comedy clubs here in San Diego, I gave most of the profit back to my workers and to the business. Because I was in the United States Navy, they paid my salary, took care of my mortgage, took care of my car payment. This comedy club was extra. I created three comedy clubs here in San Diego, and they were phenomenal. And I gave back to the community. I'd always have a discount night, or I would have a, let's say, a fundraiser of some sort. We did one year. This was a teenager went abducted, and we raised money to help the private investigator track her down and found actually where she was and got her back to her family. That's again part of the invisible hand. When they prosper in terms of the labor, as the owner of the restaurant has, they also are able to add employees and grow, indirectly helping the community. And it's called creating more and more jobs for the economy. All right, quick little review, little quick quiz. What is the difference between macro economics, and micro. Macro, think of the word max, big, big. We're looking at the entire country, the nation. Micro, okay, we're looking at individual systems, what people are doing. Let's say entrepreneurship. How is that helping the economy? That's the micro view of the economy. What is better for a economy than teaching a man to fish? That's an old proverb. You teach a man to fish, he'll feed his family forever. If you give him a fish, he'll feed his family just for a day or two. Teach him how to fish. Teach our upcoming, let's say, generation, let's say our next generation of Congress, our next generation of entrepreneurs, our next generation of professors, how to teach well. And then the aftermath of all that, we'll have our students going into the world of being phenomenal. So what does Adam Smith's term invisible hand mean? We just invisible hand. I think it just covered. I love the fact that there are people behind the scenes doing things that are really helping the economy. And how does the invisible hand create wealth for our country? We're creating jobs. We're actually in, from my perspective, with the special needs folks in Goodwill, they're able to be a contributing part of our community, and that is what we're trying to do. As you continue the rest of the PowerPoint, you will see we're going to talk about capitalism. You're going to review state capitalism. You'll get into understanding free market capitalism. Free market capitalism and its basic rights we're going to cover as well. Understanding free market capitalism. This PowerPoint we get into the ins and out of that. And don't forget your textbooks covers a lot of this as well. And there's videos that associate your textbook. How free markets work, you'll get into that. And that's the conclusion of the mini lecture. I always try to put a mini lecture together because there's over 70 some slides here. There's no way you're going to be captivated by 71 or 72 of the PowerPoint slides. I wanted to capsulate, put it in one little small package for you so you can digest it in small chunks. Now, what I'd like you to do is continue reviewing the rest of the PowerPoint, review the chapter within the textbook, and from there, you'll learn more about the very first chapter, which is understanding economic systems and business.